This podcast features criminologists discussing sensitive themes and topics. Listener discretion is advised.
A woman helps a young disabled man find his voice. But is it really him, or is she putting words in his mouth? This is the Anna Stubblefield story. Good morning, Meghan.
Oh, good morning. I just heard your intro, and I have to tell you, I have been waiting for you to cover this story.
You and a lot of other people, because this was suggested by many, many listeners, and this is because there was a very popular Netflix documentary. And I know you know it because I purposely told you not to watch it because I know that you would have.
I absolutely would have, and it's killing me, by the way, not to watch it and wait for this, but I did. I didn't cheat. I just waited. So just so you know, I am ready.
Good. And for those of you who might not know what we're talking about, this is the Netflix documentary called Tell Them You Love Me. And I had never heard of this case before this documentary, and I'm kind of surprised because it's very local to us. In fact, part of the story takes place at Rutgers Newark, and I teach through Rutgers Newark. So I would have thought I would hear about this case somehow.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to talk about it over there, though, you know?
Yeah, maybe they have good PR people. I don't know. Well, there's a lot of interesting topics to cover, and the case is pretty polarizing. So what we'll do here, as we usually do, we'll lay out the known facts, and we will let you, our listeners, decide what you think really happened. Now, on to Anna. Anna grew up in Plymouth, Michigan, where her parents were both PhDs in special education. They were also very involved in local politics, environmentalism, and women's rights. Anna's mother, Sandra McLennan, started working with blind, cognitively impaired children in 1963. And for decades, she would teach disabled people social skills, such as shaking hands and talking appropriately with strangers, and her hope was to help them move out of state-run hospitals and into community housing. And not surprisingly, Anna was very inspired by her parents' work, and she would follow in their footsteps. Starting in high school when she wrote for the school newspaper on the topic of injustice. And I don't know about you, Meghan, but in high school, I wasn't thinking about topics such as injustice. I was so concerned with, my friends and hanging out and stuff like that.
No, I was a geek, so I was.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Okay. Anna also studied Braille and she learned sign language. She would go on to obtain her PhD in the year 2000, and she became a scholar in the field of Africana philosophy, and she would publish many papers on the topic of race and ethics. Anna was also the chairwoman of the American Philosophical Association's Committee on the Status of Black Philosophers. So this is a very accomplished woman. She also wrote a book that was published by Cornell University Press, and this was titled Ethics Along the Color Line.
It's interesting that the focus of her studies is ethics.
It's very interesting, especially when you hear how this all plays out.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the aspects of this case that made it so interesting to people.
Right.
Now, I didn't mention this before, but in 1989, before she pursued higher education, Anna had married a man named Roger Stubblefield, and he was a tuba player and a classical composer, and the two would go on to have 2 children together.
Okay.
The family of 4 resided in West Orange, New Jersey, which I'm pretty sure you know that area, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's very close to where we work and also somewhat close to where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So Anna was living kind of an idyllic lifestyle with her family of 4, and she was working as the director of the American Studies doctoral program at Rutgers University, Newark.
Wow.
For about 11 years, she taught various ethics and philosophy courses, and later her focus and research would shift to race and disability. And this is where her life would take a turn, as in the year 2009, she met a student named John Johnson. Now, John had obtained his master's in history, and he was currently pursuing his PhD. So John took one of Anna's philosophy and disability studies classes at Rutgers. John was very interested in this topic because it was personal for him. You see, he had a younger brother, Derek, who had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy and hydrocephalus after suffering multiple seizures as an infant. Derek struggled a lot. It was difficult for him to walk, but he eventually learned how to walk after attending a day program and participating in his family's daily routine. Now, John says that while his brother was what he considers there or present, and he did express emotions like feeling happy or frustrated, he never had a formal education. John always felt that his brother was capable of achieving more, and John had always wanted to pursue the possibility of getting his brother engaged in academics. After one particular class discussion on the topic of facilitated communication, or FC as it is known, John started thinking about whether or not his brother would benefit from facilitated communication.
So, Amy, I kind of know, but can you explain what facilitated communication is, just to be clear?
Yep. So it's an assisted typing technique where a facilitator physically supports a disabled person's hand or arm. It's kind of like with a light touch on the person's elbow, and it's supposed to keep the person's hand steady as they point to letters on a page or a keyboard. And this would spell out words as a form of allowing the individual to communicate.
Mm-hmm. So, Amy, I would assume this technique is for people who have severe limitations to communication.
Yes, absolutely. It's for people that are nonverbal and have trouble communicating. John was not sure about this technique, but Anna had showed the class a documentary on a young woman who was nonverbal, and she had used this technique. And not only did she communicate with those around her, she was able to graduate college through using facilitated communication. And John was really hopeful that this facilitated communication technique would be able to help his brother Derek. So after the film, he approached his professor, Anna, and he explained his brother's situation and asked Anna if she thought that perhaps facilitated communication would be something that could help Derek.
And Anna was a facilitator?
So that's a good question because for now, she's just showing the class the video.
Right.
But after John approaches Anna tells John that she's actually very familiar with this technique because her mother had actually been a trailblazer in this area, and she was one of the first to use facilitated communication, and her mom had used it for over 20 years, working with her own clients. So Anna grew up around this technique, and she also told John that she had taken a 3-day workshop on the use of facilitated communication.
Okay.
So Anna offered to help assess Derek to see if the technique could potentially work for him. And Derek's family was so grateful for this kind offer, and Anna began coming to the home often, working with Derek. So just to set the stage here, Derek's brother is John, as I mentioned, and then they live with their mother, Daisy. Father is not in the picture, so it's a family of 3.
Okay.
So at first, Anna would go there about 7 hours a week to work with Derek. Anna said very early on that it was clear to her that Derek was very intelligent and that he was able to communicate very well. And this is more than anyone thought would ever be possible. Anna says he was learning fast, and this was shocking to Derek's family, especially for John, because John says that this was confirmation of what he felt he always knew, that his brother was capable and more intelligent than anyone believed. Anna continued going to the home and visiting with Derek, and their times together increased in frequency, and Derek continued excelling. By the fall of 2010, Derek was doing so well that he began attending an in-person class at Rutgers, and this was a class in African American literature. At first, Anna went to the class with him and provided what she called communication support. And then a student by the name of Sharonda Jones, who was an RA of Anna's, helped Derek with his homework. So basically, Derek would sit in class, he would listen to the lectures, and then he would write essays with the help of this assistant, Sharonda Jones, who worked with Anna. So Anna would save everything they did together in something called a Neo. A Neo is a small computer. It actually kind of looks like a label maker.
Ah, okay.
So all of the facilitated communication conversations would be saved in this device. I mentioned that here because it will come back up later.
Okay.
Anna continued working with Derek and says that she started to feel very close to Derek and that the two were best friends. She said she loved spending time with him and was very impressed at how far he had come. But by the spring of 2011, this friendship had gone far beyond simply being proud of Derek's progress. Anna found that she was fully in love with Derek, and according to Anna, she had told him this, and he said he loved her too.
Okay, so here's where things are getting controversial. Yes. Got it.
And just a reminder, Anna is married with 2 children at this point as well.
So when she's saying that Derek says he's in love with her too, I assume that he's typing this to her with her facilitation.
Correct. So with Anna's facilitation, Derek is telling Anna that he loves her.
Okay. And Amy, just what is the age difference between these two as well? I'm curious.
Oh, that's a good question. So there's about a decade age gap between them. So at this time, Anna was in her late 30s and Derek was in his late 20s.
Okay.
So after learning that Derek loved her back, Anna says that he asked her to kiss him. And again, this is via the typing device that he used as she facilitated. She also says that they attempted to have intercourse.
Okay. I mean, I think this is where things are really getting controversial.
Very, very controversial.
Sorry, I assume you're going to talk about whether, like, he's able to consent and...
Yes, that becomes kind of the crux of today's episode.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that, the age difference, not a big deal.
No.
He's above the age of consent.
Yeah.
However, he is a disabled man, and there's also a power dynamic. She's kind of his professor in a way, or his teacher.
Yes.
Not surprisingly, around this time, Anna's relationship with the family started to strain because Anna started telling Derek's family things about him that they had never known before. And this kind of started small. One day they were in the car and there was gospel music on the radio. And Anna changed the station and put on classical, telling Daisy that Derek doesn't like gospel music. He, in fact, prefers classical.
Okay.
On another occasion, Daisy went to give Derek his food, and it was chicken. And Anna said that he didn't like chicken because he was now a vegetarian. And around this time, she also told the family that he likes red wine.
Okay.
So she's like creating this persona of, this man who has his own preferences for the first time. This is, surprising to the family.
Well, just to play devil's advocate, you could argue that he just couldn't communicate this as well before with them, that they didn't really understand all of his preferences until now.
That's absolutely correct. And just to give her the benefit of the doubt, yeah, sure, that is very possible. But John was pretty shocked by these new preferences because he just felt like they weren't his brothers. So at this point, the family starts to wonder whether it was really Derek saying these things or if Anna was overly facilitating this communication.
Right.
At one point, Anna also accused Daisy of treating Derek like a kid when he was actually a man and that he should have more autonomy. She also told Daisy that he wanted to live independently. So the more these things came out, the more John and Daisy began to suspect that something was going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Other than these new preferences that were emerging, other things were going on as well. So neither John nor Daisy were able to use facilitated communication with Derek themselves. So somehow it was only Anna who was able to help Derek communicate.
Okay.
Yeah, so John started investigating, and he started doing some research on the techniques. So this all started because he was trying to find the documentary that Anna had showed in class, just so he can get some more information about facilitated communication.
Right.
And he came across a Frontline documentary that questioned the role of the facilitator and how much they could influence what the individual responded with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this particular documentary focused on a series of experiments where a facilitator and the person they were working with were shown pictures. So basically, there were two individuals and there was like a partition in between them. So they would show a picture to both the facilitator and the individual who was trying to communicate. And they found that the responses always favored the facilitator. So, for example, when they were shown the same picture of, say, a set of keys, then the individual would type the word keys. But when the facilitator was shown a hat and the disabled individual was shown a cup, the disabled individual would type in hat.
Very interesting. Okay.
And the facilitator was not aware that the pictures were different.
That is very interesting.
Yes, and this was repeated several times with the same result. Now, it's important to point out that this Frontline documentary focused on one case. So it's what's known as a case study. It wasn't a large sample size. So, of course, it's possible that it was just this one-off incident where facilitated communication didn't work. But for John, this was just further evidence that Anna was doing something that was incorrect.
Okay.
The documentary concluded that facilitated communication was actually tapping into the unconscious thoughts of the facilitator. John shared this information with Daisy, and the two of them approached Anna and told her that she was no longer welcome in their home. Now, at this time, Anna and Derek sat down and told Daisy and John about their physical relationship.
Oh, boy.
So Anna and Derek, using facilitated communication, sat Daisy and John down and told them that they had a physical relationship and that they loved each other.
This must have been really shocking.
Yeah, the family was convinced that this was just Anna, quote, speaking for Derek, and that she had taken advantage of him sexually.
Well, I can certainly understand their concerns.
At this time, they felt that just telling Anna not to come back was enough. They weren't pursuing any legal recourse at this time. They just wanted Anna to leave their son alone. Now, I'm leaving out some of the disturbing details of the sexual encounters between the two, but if you watch the documentary, you can hear some of the details that Anna told Daisy and John about their sexual encounters.
So multiple sexual encounters, though. We should know that.
I would say a couple.
Okay. Yep.
She talks about how sometimes things didn't work, and then when things did work, but there were a few occasions. One of the occasions happened in her office on the Rutgers campus.
Oh, okay.
So although Anna was told that she can no longer see Derek, she began reaching out to Derek's day program, asking to see him. And now this was the last straw for John, because Anna wasn't going away and John was angry. So he approached the dean at Rutgers to let the school know what was going on, and now a sexual assault case was opened up against Anna. In August of 2011, Daisy called Anna and asked her many questions about her relationship with Derek, including how many times they were intimate. And Anna told her everything. But what Anna didn't know was that Daisy was being coached by the police over a recorded phone call as part of a sexual assault investigation.
Okay.
So now police had what they needed. After the phone call, they were able to execute a search warrant on Anna's office and her home. And this search warrant would be the first time that her husband learned about what was going on.
I was just about to ask if there was, like, her husband, if anyone knew outside of this. Boy, I would like to know. Do we know what our husband had to say about this or thought, or we didn't really get that information?
I can tell you that they separated.
Well, okay, yeah. That's
Yeah.
not surprising. All right.
No. In October of 2011, Anna was suspended from her teaching job at Rutgers, and this was during the ongoing investigation. Now, a few months into the investigation, in June of 2012, Derek was given an evaluation by an expert speech pathologist and professor at Harvard Medical School. This is a man by the name of Howard Shane, and this evaluation was arranged by the prosecution. This expert concluded that Derek was severely mentally disabled and did not have the cognitive ability to communicate the way Anna claimed he did. And upon this testimony, Anna was officially charged with sexual assault of a disabled man. After many delays, the trial began in September of 2015, and the ability to consent was one of the main questions. The prosecution claimed that Derek was incapable of consent and that he was physically helpless to resist it, and that Anna either knew or should have known at the time. Now, Anna was facing 2 counts of first-degree aggravated sexual assault. And in New Jersey, this is the same charge that would apply to someone who had inflicted severe injury during a rape or participated in a violent gang rape. So we're talking about a pretty serious level offense.
Oh, I was going to say there's going to be serious prison time with that too then.
Yes. A big issue that emerged, however, was that Anna's defense could not use anything from the Neo device or the testimony regarding facilitated communication.
Oh, they couldn't use. Wow. Okay, so that really limits them. Why aren't they able to use any of this information?
Well, they could not use this because at the time, New Jersey was considered a fry state. I know that you know what that means, but I will explain. So there's 2 standards of what evidence can be admitted into court. There's the Daubert standard and the Fry standard. Fry relies on whether or not the scientific community determines the method or the testimony as reliable, whereas Daubert relies on judges to determine the significance of the testimony. So in this case, there wasn't a lot of evidence on this, but from what was available, the scientific community seemed to believe that facilitated communication was actually a bogus technique.
But isn't the controversy whether or not it is the facilitator or the person they are helping who's actually guiding the communication?
That is correct. In fact, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, they describe facilitated communication as, quote, a discredited technique that should not be used.
Wow.
Going on to say that there is, quote, extensive scientific evidence that messages are authored by the facilitator rather than the person with a disability.
So I had a feeling that that's what you were going to say, that this came down to the credibility or the reliability of this technique and it didn't have widespread acceptance in the field. But aren't they going to have to reference this as part of the case? They might not be able to use it as a defense, but it's going to come in. I don't see how this wouldn't come in because this is all of the actions even occurred through this type of communications. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. Without the facilitated communication aspect of this case, there's kind of no case because that's everything, right? But this really just makes the defense's job more difficult because the facts are that she admits to having sexual relations with this man, and she claims it was consensual because she says that via the facilitation, he consented.
Right.
But if they can't use the facilitation, then
I don't understand how they're going to communicate what actually happened without discussing the facilitation, is what I mean. Like the actual facts of the case, it seems to me, would be in question. But okay.
Yeah, so the facts of the case really come down to, is Derek in his current condition able to consent? So that's kind of what the trial was. They had experts who evaluated Derek to see whether or not he was able to consent to this relationship.
And I assume that they're saying he can't testify? Because that's the next question. Can he testify?
He does not testify, but quite shockingly, in my opinion, they brought Derek in and he was being held up by his mother. And it was almost like he was an exhibit in this case. Almost like he was like paraded in almost as a way to show the jury his condition. I'm not saying that that's what they intended, but that's kind of what it felt like.
Are you saying it felt icky?
I think it kind of felt like this. But many people would say that it was important for the jurors to see his condition. And I kind of understand that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it muddies the waters a little bit.
Yeah, I understand.
But at the end of the day, it did seem to have an impact because on October 2nd of 2015, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, Anna was found guilty on both counts of first-degree aggravated sexual assault where the victim was helpless or mentally incapacitated.
Whoa, that's quick.
Yes. And on January 15th of 2016, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison with parole supervision for life.
Wow, that's serious time. They're sending a message.
Yes, and guess where she was sent?
Edna Mann.
Edna Mann. That's where Melanie McGuire is. And for those of you who don't know who Melanie is, that means you haven't listened to Direct Appeal Season 1.
You better go ahead and listen to it. No. I mean, I knew it was Edna Mann because it's the only female prison in New Jersey. So that was...
Yes, of course. And I also used to teach at Edna Mann, so we know Edna Mann very well. So despite this conviction, Anna appealed, and a 3-judge panel decided in her favor.
What?
Yes, and this all rested on the fact that Anna's defense was unable to introduce testimony on the validity of facilitated communication. So I was somewhat shocked, and this happened pretty quickly. This was in June of 2017.
It's like I am and I'm not shocked. I do understand. I mean, her defense was seriously hampered by that. So
yes, it was.
But I always think appeals are hard to prevail on. So
Rather than go through another trial, Anna was offered a plea, which she accepted. And I think this was the right move. And once I tell you what the deal was, I think you'll agree. So she pled guilty to the lesser charge of third-degree aggravated criminal sexual contact, to which she was sentenced to time served.
Whoa.
And she was released from prison.
Well, what was the time served?
At this point, it was about 2 years.
Okay.
From the point of her being convicted to the point of the appeal and the plea. So in May of 2018, she was released and she's still on parole supervision, but she was released from custody.
Now, is she considered a sex offender? Does she have to register?
That's a great question, Meghan. She is a registered sex offender, and she is on lifetime parole supervision.
Wow, from 12 years to 2 years. Okay. All right. I'm going to hold this until we get to this discussion part.
Yes, we'll have a nice long discussion. So after her release, Anna got a waitressing job, but she was let go after a customer complained. Anna's case was in the media, and the public was mostly not in her favor.
Yeah.
As I know you know, because you teach crime in the media, the media has a lot of sway over public opinion.
Sure.
And the media was definitely not on Anna's side.
Yep.
She then got a part-time remote job where she says that no one knows her and she has anonymity. Today, Anna mostly lives a private life and maintains that she and Derek were in love and that he consented to their physical relationship. She's not showing any remorse. You could see her in this documentary because she does not believe she did anything wrong.
Well, I guess time hasn't changed that. It's interesting.
Derek's family, of course, say that they're still dealing with the after effects of what happened. Daisy says that Derek had to go on some additional medications. It's not clear exactly for what, I do think that Daisy and John also are having a lot of trouble dealing with this because in their view, a loved one was sexually assaulted by this woman that they trusted to come into their home. Regardless of whether you fall on the side of Derek being able to consent or Derek was not able to consent, as of the recording of this episode, facilitated communication has been rejected by the American Psychological Association, as I mentioned before, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, and several other reputable organizations. Now, I do want to mention, though, that there are some professionals who still use facilitated communication and say that it's a valuable way for disabled individuals to communicate. So there is still this, you still have a camp of people that believe in the validity of this technique.
Interesting. I clearly don't know enough about the technique to speak about whether or not it's valid or not, but I am with you. Like, it can't just be one case study or two case studies. There has to be a reliable body of evidence. So tests that are done, empirical testing over and over again. I'd want to see reliability, for this kind of technique.
So now, Meghan, let's have a bit of a discussion here because the key question in this case is whether Derek Johnson had the intellectual ability to consent to sex. Now, there are really, in my opinion, there are two ways to look at this case. One is that it's a tragic love story. The other is that of a severely handicapped man who was victimized by a woman that his family trusted. Now, I have to say, I think it's possible for both sides to be correct. I think Anna did love Derek, and I think it's possible that she believed he was able to consent through the use of facilitated communication. However, I can also see how the family was victimized and how Derek could be a victim of sexual assault.
Yeah, no, I don't think this is one of those clear-cut cases. Anna truly believed in facilitated communication. If she truly believes in the method, it means that she believes that he was able to communicate with her because she believes this method works. So that I understand. However, she should still see that there's a power dynamic here.
Yes.
And that part, regardless of what you think of the facilitated communication, still seems inappropriate to me. And beyond that, criminal, actually, if you think about it. Because I think if she was a man and Derek was a female, I'm not even sure we'd be having this discussion because it wouldn't be questionable. He would be guilty and we'd be looking at this as a straight assault. So I think that she maybe even received the benefit here because she was a female.
I absolutely agree. And not only was she a female, she was a female of means. She had a PhD.
Yeah.
Oh, she was a white woman, middle class. So yes, that all worked in her favor for sure. I don't think anyone can deny that. And while I said I think that both can be true, I'm a little closer on your side because I do think the power dynamic, even if he was able to consent, I still don't think this is maybe morally correct. This is we see this often. There's a difference between legality and morality. So whether or not what she did was illegal, I think is kind of separate from was it, ethically correct. And as you brought up in the beginning, she was an ethics professor. So she should have known better.
I think that troubles me almost the most.
Yes.
Because I hear like she was devoted to ethics. I mean, she's violated her own core area of study. I think it's wrong.
Yes. And there's one other fact that came out that makes me question whether or not Derek was able to consent. 5 years before Anna met Derek, a clinical psychologist named Wayne Tillman, who consults for New Jersey's Bureau of Guardianship Services, assessed Derek. This psychologist concluded that Derek's impairments were so severe that they could not even do any formal testing of intelligence. And he said that his comprehension was quite limited, his attention span was very short, and that he lacks the cognitive capacity to understand and participate in decisions. It was even concluded that Derek was not able to carry out basic preschool-level tasks.
Wow.
Now, based on this diagnosis, is it even possible that Derek gained enough cognitive ability to not just take college classes in the space of a few years, but also be able to form consent? I think that is unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, you have to agree, though, that that's a reliable test as well, that, his tests are valid, which, I'm reserving judgment until I even see the documentary as well, because I'd like to see for myself just to be able to see is their basic cognitive functioning.
Yep.
What's really sad, regardless, is he's either a victim really of sexual assault or he's a victim because he was in love and now or believed he was in love, his perception. And then this woman just disappeared from his life. I think it's so sad for him either way. And it actually hurts my heart for him. Because if you think about it, either way, it's kind of awful for him.
Yes, I agree that Derek is the ultimate victim here, and there's no scenario in which he wins because, as you pointed out.
There's not. I think that's the sad part here.
And again, I think it's possible that Anna was well-intentioned, but her acts were still extremely harmful.
Yeah.
And all of this is made more interesting by the fact that she studied ethics and race and disability. And Anna felt really strongly on these issues and felt that it was her duty to speak up for injustice, again, particularly in these areas of race and disability. So, I'm wondering if there's almost like she felt like she was Derek's savior. She wanted, she really wanted to believe that she was helping this man.
Yeah.
And maybe she convinced herself that she was saving him.
She convinced herself that there was a significant relationship between the two. There's no doubt about that. And maybe for her, she saw that as the justice, He's not a disabled man. He's, she saw him as something different than maybe what he was. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe she was a bit of a savior in some ways. I can see that for sure.
And then that also leads to the possibility of her having a personality disorder and, having feelings of grandiosity that she can come in and kind of save this man.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I see that.
From the little bit we know here, do you see any other evidence of a personality disorder or any other theories that can help us understand Anna's behavior?
Yeah, techniques of neutralization, clearly. She doesn't believe that Derek's a victim. She doesn't believe that she did any harm. She believes that this was a grown-up relationship.
Yep.
And look, I can't say for certain that it wasn't, but it does not seem like that on the surface to me whatsoever. But she certainly believed it. I think you're right. I think both of those scenarios that you discussed before were true.
I didn't think of techniques of neutralization, but yes, I think this is a perfect example of her using, this justification or, being able to mitigate the harm that she's causing by looking at Derek as a man who can consent, who had autonomy.
You might also say this is control balance theory right here. She had all this power and control, and people with too much power commit predatory crimes in certain ways. So you might look at it that way as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'd be curious to hear what our listeners think, because as I mentioned, it seems that the public sentiment was that Anna was in the wrong here. I'm curious how the documentary has changed public perception. From the little bit I've read, I think people were angered by how flippant she seemed in the documentary. And when you watch it, I'm curious what you think. But she's almost like smirking as she's telling the story and like reliving these moments with Derek. And I don't get the sense that she thinks she did anything wrong at all. And I don't think she sees Derek as a victim or understands how this could be harmful or hurtful to Derek's family. And I think if she showed some remorse or at least recognized the harm she caused, I think that would have been helpful for her, but it's very clear that she does not feel like she did anything wrong.
That's a shame. I'm going to watch the documentary now. Even if she doesn't think she had committed or perpetrated a crime, she should see the ethical boundaries that she crossed, and she should recognize that she did cause harm. And I hope in the long run she does.
Especially, again, given her area of study. I think that's the most shocking part is you would think an ethics professor has higher ethics and morality than the general population, but this seems to be quite the opposite.
Yeah, that's the surprising part. It's kind of like with police officers. If a police officer does something wrong, we cut them a break. It's like, aren't we supposed to hold them to a higher standard in some regards, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's why I said I hope with some time, there has been enough time, but it doesn't seem like she recognizes her harm, and I think that is a shame. And I hope that will change.
Yes. And I can only hope that Derek and his family have been able to move on from this. From what I understand, John is a professor now, and he's doing really great work. And Daisy and Derek seem to be doing well. I do believe there is a civil suit that's pending, but I haven't been able to find more information on that.
Very interesting, Amy. I am going to watch the documentary tonight.
Excellent. I would be curious what you think, so let me know. And if you or someone you know is affected by sexual assault, you can contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 800-656-4673 or visit rainn.org, RAINN.org for online support. Meghan, before we head out today, we do have one supporter question.
Okay.
The question is, would you ever consider doing another podcast? Maybe something true crime adjacent?
I would definitely consider doing another podcast, but it's hard for me to think what outside true crime I would do. I would definitely consider another true crime podcast. Adjacent? Yeah, I think so. If there was a good idea. I think we really like podcasting. So for me, that would be a yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing a podcast where interviewing more people or, talking to more people, because as much as I love talking to you, I also think it's fun to talk to other people as well, believe it or not.
Sure. And no, it's also fun when we get to talk to forensic psychologists and other people who are kind of adjacent to what we do as well. So I get that for sure.
Yes.
Good question.
Yes, and maybe we'll have a Direct Appeal season 3 one day. Who knows?
I would definitely do one on food and wine. I just don't think anyone would listen.
I would too. Or we can just do one talking about how cute our dogs are.
Or my baby.
Or your baby, yes. I would actually love a podcast about what Toby's doing that's so cute. Just
no one would listen.
No one would listen. All right. Well, thank you for that lighthearted question. We always appreciate it. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Women in Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonzo. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include Tell Them You Love Me, the Netflix documentary, Forbes, People, New York Times, NJ.com, facilitatedcommunication.org, and Slate.